126 people. Rather subtle. Just checking, can everybody hear us in the room? If someone just wants to put a thumbs up. Brilliant, thank you very much, guys. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Gillian Dudgeon tōku ingoa. Hi, I'm Gillian Dudgeon and I am the Deputy Chief Executive of Delivery at the Tertiary Education Commission. It's fantastic to see so many people subscribing for this workshop. No pressure team that are doing all the delivery of the session today, and it's great to see all the interest in the changes to vocational education. Now, what we do know, and from the processes we've been going through over several months, is different groups of people have different questions. So what I just wanted to do at the beginning of today's session was clarify what this session is going to be talking about and the questions that we'll be answering. So this session has been set up specifically in response to questions and interest from industry stakeholders on what is entailed in setting up a PTE. Because we know going forward that PTEs, Polytechs and Wānanga can all provide work-based learning if they meet the requirements of industry stakeholders, TEC and NZQA. So we know that by the end of 2027, all delivery will need to move from the existing 9 work-based learning divisions within Te Pukenga to new entities, and that many industry groups and stakeholders are interested in potentially being involved in the establishment of PTEs that would be able to take over this delivery. Some industries are really keen to get on and do it right now, and others are thinking about what it means. So in some of our early conversations, we thought that it would be really useful for everyone to be really clear about what it means to be a PTE. We know that for many industry stakeholders, we previously had industry training organisations, but there are differences between the previous industry training organisations and the obligations and requirements around being a PTE. And so we've got NZQA with us today to be able to talk us through that detail. So if you were expecting us to be covering other areas of the change, we won't be offended if you drop off the call, that's perfectly fine. But if you have got questions that aren't about this topic, please feel free to send us an email and make contact, because we do want to be able to support you. We will be sending out regular communications to industry stakeholders, and so that will cover a number of things. But so the session today is just about establishing PTEs, what it takes, and questions about that. And if we get questions about anything else, we won't be going through those today, but we're more than happy for you to contact us directly. So if we go to the agenda for the session. So I've done the introduction, then I'm going to do a bit of a scope about what we're covering. Then Jen is going to talk about PTE registration, and then Bridget and James are going to talk about the TEC requirements for new PTEs. And then Anna's going to talk about ongoing performance requirements. And then Bridget's going to talk about it as well from a TEC perspective. And then talking about some additional webinars happening in August. And then we'll have a question session. So in terms of popping questions, I presume there's a question, there's a Q&A place where you can pop your questions, and then we can go through that. So if we look at the scope, as I said, this is about supporting industry groups who are establishing or thinking about establishing new PTEs with the aim of receiving provision and learners from the work-based learning divisions that are currently in Te Pukenga, and as at the beginning of next year, are planned to transition into the new industry skills boards. So if you've got different circumstances, please do make contact with us and be able to talk through things. I mean, there will be new PTEs who want to offer work-based learning, new enrolments. There will be existing providers who want to offer work-based learning for the first time, but new enrolments, and there will be existing providers who want to receive provision and learners from those work-based learning divisions. We won't be going through that detail in today's session, but more than happy for you to reach out to us. So after all of that, I'll hand over to Jen, who's going to talk to us about PTE registration. And Bridget's doing a marvellous job with the slides. If any of the terminology that we're talking about today doesn't make sense to you, please feel free to put something in the chat because we know it's quite easy for us to talk about sometimes in language that everybody doesn't understand.
If you want to start talking, okay, then I'll catch up.
Thanks, Gillian. Kia ora koutou. I'm Jen Cooper and I'm a team leader at Approvals and Accreditation at NZQA, and our little team looks after new PTE registration, new applications to become code signatories, that's for providers that want to enrol international students, and associated approvals in terms of things like programs and micro-credentials. So yeah, this first slide is just spelling out what everyone probably should know already, is that you don't have to be a registered PTE with NZQA to deliver good education in New Zealand, but if you want to have TSC or some other forms of government funding as well, enrol international students or assess against standards, or deliver a program that leads to something on the framework, a qualification or a micro-credential, then you do need to be PTE registered. So obviously that covers, in many ways, work-based training. So all of our requirements are on the website. We've got the rules there and some guidelines, and the link is there. There's an application form and the guidelines line up with it. The rules are a little bit more sort of spread around, but everything's there. And I'm just going to go through some of the main requirements for PTE registration. So one of the things that we're encouraging industry groups to do is to contact us early. We do get a lot of inquiries, but when there's sort of serious ones, and everyone in this sector at the moment is going to be serious, it's really nice to meet with people and talk through not only the main requirements, but just establishing that we've got everything on the same page before you start putting lots of work into it. And one of the other advantages of that is that you will meet some staff that will be usually with you through the registration process, so you can build up a bit of a relationship with us. And I don't know if it's possible for Paula to put her camera on. I've just got one of my team here. Oh, she can't? Okay, sorry, Paula. It was a good idea. But yeah, so yeah, it would normally be an opportunity for you to see people face to face. So I've got a bit of detail there about the time frame and the cost. Those are our standard quality assurance fees. And yeah, it's good to kick it off and have a direct contact. One of the other things that I mentioned just quickly here is that where the entity that is applying to NZQA needs to be a body corporate in its own right, so a charity or a company, an association. When we're dealing with that entity, they have to be have personnel and all their financials associated with that PTE. So we're looking at an entity that is the provider, not sort of a parent-child relationship with an industry body, if that makes sense. So, yeah. Yes. So there's three main requirements. and along with the application form. The application form is really long. It's a little bit daunting, but if you think about it in a way as sort of a bit of a table of contents, and what you're going to do is reference against all those requirements where things sit. So you'd be saying, this. I spell out exactly what our education offer is in this section of our business plan, or we've done our marketing and it's in this section of the business plan. Likewise with the requirements around the code and how you're going to teach, assess, how things are going to work in terms of your personnel, you'd say, and this is covered in the relevant section of our quality management system, whether that's assessment and moderation, program development, staff recruitment, all those kinds of things. So yeah, your core kind of corporate documents are going to meet most of the requirements of the application forms. The other thing that we're looking for is the details of what you're going to deliver. So again, for industry that are looking at moving from one place to another, that's probably going to be pretty clear too. Just think about the future though. Don't, I guess, think about necessarily taking everything with you. If that's one of the things that you're thinking about, it's really about making sure that you've got a fit for purpose product. One of the things with PTEs that didn't apply so strictly to ITOs is that you do have to deliver everything you have approval for. There's elapsing rules in the Act, so you can't just have kind of stuff sitting on your approval register and not being offered it. So we have done some PTE registration of entities that used to be an ITO or used to be part of an ITO. So we've learnt a lot over the last few years, especially with the WBL at Te Pukenga doing the work-based learning delivery, about how work-based learning translates into the PTE registration rules and requirements. Yeah, we'll look at that next. Oh, okay, sorry, a couple of other things you have to do. So for all the personnel that are in what we call a governing member position, we need to have fit and proper person and conflict of interest declarations. So that's for under governing members, that's senior managers, as well as, your governing members, directors and such like. Have a drink of water. So, work-based training and PTEs. So, all of the questions are very much the same. Becoming a PTE, there's one set of rules. It's very much a one-size-fits-all process in terms of the requirements, but we do appreciate the angle that different PTEs are coming from, whether or not they're a charity or whether or not they're doing foundation or commercial or international. You know, we try and customize the experience, I guess. But one of the things that might be particularly pertinent for industry that used to be working in an ITO model is that the arranging training model has a whole lot of different ways that it might be done. It might be done with providers. It might be done, entirely employer-led. In the PTE registration process, we're looking for questions really around what exactly is the services and the education offer that your PTE is doing around that model. So are you developing resources? Are you managing groups of subject matter experts for the purposes of things like moderation? How do we see where that education provision sits within your PTE? Because a PTE is a provider, so not just an arranger. So we're looking at where that expertise sits, particularly subject matter expertise, and how that works with your employers. The other thing is that we're looking at how the quality of the employer-led training is supported, and how code obligations will be met. And I'll talk about code in a minute. But we have put a bit of a guide together from what we've learned over the last few years, which is in the link there. And it's based around actually an Ako Aotearoa report from some time ago, which sort of said that you could look at your quality management system for work-based training from 3 different areas. One's kind of the learner experience and what they are bringing, so your target group. One is the TEO, your own capability, so the TEO, sorry, the Tertiary Education Organisation, or your PTE. So where's all your capability and support sitting? And the third one is your employers that you're working with. What are you looking to them to bring to support the work-based training? And it's I've found generally that the guide using those focus headings speaks pretty well to industry training. But that's one of our documents, and so we're keen to get feedback on that, and hopefully it helps. And the next one is about the code. So the code applies to all PTEs, and being part of any registered provider or TPK, you'll be familiar with it already. So it's got a couple of, it's got some main outcome areas there for all domestic learners. There's a couple of statements there in bold on the PowerPoint about taking all reasonable steps and ensuring so far as possible. So the code team at NZQA have looked at some of the differences there might be for domestic learners and work-based training, and some of the things that you might consider to be pastoral on your side, and some of the things that you might consider to be pastoral on the employer's side. It's all just a little bit different than when you're dealing with full-time, learners in a classroom-based scenario. So they're on the NZQA website. There's a lot of resources for code. They're really good. They do. There's things that you can do a gap analysis, so you can look to see, what you're doing now and whether or not there's any of the requirements of the code that still need to be met. And there's also some information there just designed for work-based training, which is useful as well. Sorry, I didn't put the link in there, but there's a whole tab for the code on the NZQA website. So I guess those are if you're looking at not enrolling any international learners, and in a work-based context, that probably means that you're not looking at learners on a work visa, then you're really just looking at those outcomes there for your domestic learners. They're all going to be covered in one way or another by your QMS. So again, thinking about the application form again as a bit of a table of contents, there's a section in there on the code where you can line up those outcomes with your quality management system around student support, around how you get feedback, and just around things like pastoral care and health and safety, which is always a really big concern in work-based training. So you'll have a lot of that stuff in your system already. If you're looking at work-based learners work visa learners, then you will need to be a code signatory. They're considered to be international students under the Act. So it would be a good idea to look at the requirements of the code when you're doing your PTE registration application, because there's so much crossover there in terms of your QMS, in terms of your collateral for learners. The code is very focused for international learners, very focused on student information and also their rights and responsibilities. So all of that stuff will be tied up in your enrolment policies, your contractual arrangements with employers. So if you can, do them together. We can't take a code application until you are a registered PTE, but we can look at them at the same time and give you a bit of a steer, so that's not an onerous application once you're registered. I think that's probably about it for code. There's a few more outcomes that are associated with that. So that's the end of my slides. Yeah. At the end of this session, because Anna's got some slides in a couple of minutes, there's some contact information there as well. So if you are in the process of putting your application together, you can reach out to Approvals and Accreditation team. It'll come through to my team and someone will give you a call or set up a meeting. We're more than happy to do that. Mihi.
Great, thanks for that, Jen. And now we're going to leap into some of the TEC requirements for a new PTE. I appreciate this is quite a download of information, and we will have space for queries at the end and questions, but in the meantime, bear with us as we get through this. I'm just trying to drive and talk at the same time, and that's proven quite difficult. Okay, so we're basing this advice to you on the assumption that what we're going to get is a brand new PTE that wants to receive learning that's currently in the Te Pūkenga work-based learning divisions. So that's quite a specific set of requirements. So if you are outside of that, you may not have quite the same requirements. I'm just going to try and share again. Bear with me. Thank you. Thank you for the thumbs up. Very much appreciated. So as any newly established PTE will be new to TEC's funding. There is quite a few bits and pieces that we need to get you set up in our system and approved to receive money. So this is a list of all of those bits of pieces in one place. A provider details form is not arduous. It just has all your contact details and bits and pieces like that. James is going to talk about financial in half a second. And then we do need an investment plan as well, so that we can see what the focus of your new organisation is, what your governance is, what all your processes are, and that will include your options to support learner success and disability. Where there's overlap between NZQA and TEC, some artful cut and paste is a really good idea. So when we're asking the same thing, please do that. We're not going to ask you to do it differently. If you find that within the TEC documents there are things that you feel are repetitive, reference the other document. But, overall, we just want to make sure that every piece of information we need, we have. So as you go through that process, we can obviously take questions as well, but that's sort of is the frame for it. It may look like quite a lot, but I think between the two organisations, you will find some things the same, some things different, and between us, we'll cover it off. And Jen and I will talk to each other.
Name of a mop, isn't it?
A mop and an epic.
No idea what that is.
It's not to do with cleaning. So those are your mix of provision and your educational performance indicator commitments. So the mix of provision is what you're going to offer, what courses, and what your achievement rates, your targets you're setting for achievement rates on those are. And that's something that we try to get in every year so we can see where people are tracking. That what you're offering is super important because that's what you get paid for. So very, very important to get that right. But again, that's going to replicate some of the information that you're sharing with NZQA. For us, we want to know how many learners you're going to be putting through. So that's the difference. It's not just, are you offering it? We want to know how much. Good point. We all talk in far too many acronyms. James is going to talk to you about financial requirements.
Financials. So on the basis of the new providers, NZQA obviously requires a 3-year financial plan. So I think that's a really good starting block for any new submissions that come through. TEC is a little bit different in the sense that we require your last set of actual accounts. So if you do have a registered entity that's in play, we will be looking for that. And that's really to ensure that we've got a solid foundation to work with. We will then be looking for your forecast financial performance as well, just to check the trajectory of where you're heading. The reason we do that is we undertake a desktop financial viability assessment just to ensure that the organisation is in good health. And that's really for 2 reasons. One, it's to protect the integrity of investing Crown funding, but it's also to ensure that learners are going to a provider that is sound. We do, with the nature of our work, we do end up working in closure situations as well, and that's not fun for anybody involved, and the learners do take quite a toll there. Financials are not a one-size-fits-all as well, but what we do have is we have 6 minimum financial standards that we expect you to meet. They are up on the screen. I won't run through them. But what you will find on the website is if you search PTE financial viability, there is quite a big section in there. There is a minimum Prudential financial standards spreadsheet as well, which you can plug your historical and forecast financial information into, and it will provide you where you sit within our framework. We are more than happy to have a conversation around your unique situation as well and to work through any financial information that you do have. So if there is a question, by all means, reach out. The second bullet point there around there is a high bar to receiving TEC funding and we're not a bank is quite important. We are looking for sound financial institutions that we make an investment into. Across the spectrum of our private providers, we do have quite an array of, I suppose, positions that people are in, and we get a lot of questions of how do we support you in relation to working capital type functions. And so we are here to fund learners, We are not here to provide financing to a business, which I think is a very key thing to note. So
I was just going to say one thing about funding is that you only get funded for the number of learners you have for the time that they are with you. And so we may provide you some funding based on you saying you're going to have 100 learners. If you only have 80 learners, you will have to pay the remaining money back to us. And that's something we work very closely with. So I think this is the conversations today are all about going into becoming a PT with eyes wide open. And I think it's really important to understand that the funding model that the government has is we fund each individual learner for you and provide that amount of money each year.
correct.
Yeah.
And similar to NZQA, we're looking at the PTE that has the registration and is accredited. So we're expecting the money to sit within that entity because that is where our funding and the learner is directly involved with. So that's where I think, depending on the type of commercial arrangements that exist within your structures, I'm more than happy to have a conversation there just to ensure that that's met. Appreciate that's a pretty quick whirlwind. That can be a pretty dry topic, the financials, but the offer is there. Please do reach out and we can have more tailored conversations to meet your needs with the team.
Yes. Carrying on in terms of the paperwork requirements that you would have as a new PTE, your investment plan has various parts, and because we will send these presentations out after the fact, there's links in here that you can click on and have a look. Our recommendation to you in your first year of a PTE is when you do your investment plan, use the templates that we provide. We do find that a lot of our larger providers don't use the templates in later years, but this is the quickest and most focused way for you to get your plan done. What it really means is that you don't provide us with information that we don't need. And because there's no doubt there's a lot of work to be done to set up a new PTE, we don't want you putting your efforts in the wrong space. So that is my strong recommendation to make your life easier. But as Joe said, yeah, this is a special situation where we're transitioning learners and we'll support you along the way. And just in case you haven't read the exciting plan guidance documents, this is where you can find them on our website. Plan guidance is the document that we publish each year that says that these are our priorities and expectations for the investment round ahead. So it's a really important read for anyone in the sector, and that's followed up with supplementary plan guidance. So typically plan guidance comes out at the start of the year before funding occurs, and supplementary mid-year. So really, really important documents to be familiar with as you're writing your plans. There'll be one extra requirement in place for entities that are transitioning learners into a new PTE, and that's the receiving plan. This is not a long document, but it just picks up a few bits and pieces that may not be in a normal investment plan, and we want to be sure of. Again, some of this may be involved in your NZQA application, so cut and paste where it's relevant. It's just noticing that work-based learning has some special requirements, so we want to make sure that any PTE that's set up to take on work-based learning understands what they mean. Even this week, someone said to me, isn't work-based learning the same as extramural? And I nearly died. So what we're looking for is that you really understand what that means and how it's going to carry across. And once we've got that confidence, we're going to be feeling a lot better about investing in that. I asked my colleague who does plan assessments, what are the things that are most likely to go wrong, or what do you see as the most common errors? And so he's given this list. So I think this is gold. Save it. It's a good piece of intellectual property. But I think it's really worth thinking, what are the bits I need to spend my time on and check in to see whether you're on the right track. I know that a lot of the organisations considering becoming PTEs currently have relationship managers, so that's a really great resource as well, who can help you. But some really good ideas in this as well. That's the main things for becoming a PTE. Anna, do you want to talk about ongoing responsibilities? You're going to make me find that PowerPoint. Yeah.
So I'll just talk about, while Bridget is finding it, just what I'll cover are the NZQA requirements for maintaining registration and the ongoing quality assurance settings. So some of these things won't necessarily apply to any of you or to all of you, but I'm mentioning them because I think that as things evolve and change, sometimes, you know, what you think you'll be doing in your first year may not be what you'll be doing in your third or fourth or fifth year. And so it's important that you're aware of some of the requirements that may not apply to you immediately. The first and probably one of the biggest things in that respect is student fee protection. So as industry training, you may not receive any learner fees. We understand that. But if you do receive learner fees, if you're offering even one type of training that takes learner fees, and whether they're coming directly from the learner or whether they're coming through a student loan, there need to be specific student fee protection arrangements made. If you have questions about that, it is quite complex, so I won't go into too much detail, but if you do have any questions, we'll be happy to give you more information. There are ongoing requirements associated with that as well. So we have what is called the annual return documentation, and that varies between providers. So if you are funded, we work with TEC, so there's no duplication, and you will be reporting on your financials to TEC rather than to NZQA. If you're not funded, then we would require to see your financial statements or audits. There are also requirements to do with student fee protection audits, again, if applicable to you, as well as quarterly student fee protection attestations, again, if applicable. The annual declaration is compulsory for all PTEs, and that is essentially attesting that you have checked and verified that your entity is compliant with all requirements under the Education Act and NZQA rules. There's also a fee declaration. So there is currently an annual fee of, I believe it's 775 plus GST, and then an additional amount per EFTS. So the fees are up currently. I think there is consultation due to go out in the next couple of weeks, in the next month, on new fees that NZQA may be charging in future. So keep an eye out for that. So the fees may well change. The annual fee may change, but that would be from 2026 if it goes ahead. So once you're registered, you're delivering your education, so on and so forth, you still do need to make applications for a range of things such as new accreditations or new consent to assess against standards. If you are changing sites, that may need an additional application. Changes to governance or senior management personnel, as Jen mentioned earlier, we do have specific requirements around the fit and proper person status and conflict of interest. So if there is a change in circumstances or there are new members, again, that has to be submitted to us for approval. And also subcontracting of training. If you are intending to subcontract, that means to allow another entity to deliver training on your behalf. You will need to get approval from NZQA for that, because essentially we have granted you registration and accreditation. For you to pass that on to someone else would require us to ensure that you actually have the necessary processes and capability in place to monitor the performance of that other entity that is delivering on your behalf, because the responsibility remains with you in that situation. So what I need to stress in terms of a pitfall for providers is that all of these things and the bullet points, they all need to be done prior to them actually taking effect, not after the fact. So if you're having a new senior manager, that needs to be notified to NZQA prior to the fact and the relevant form submitted to allow for the evaluation to take place before this person is appointed. So that's just something to stress because that's a common area of non-compliance for providers that gets them in trouble. There are also detailed enrollment and record keeping requirements. So you need to keep, there are specific timeframes for how long enrollment records need to be kept for. And there are academic assessment records have to be kept for at least 12 months following the completion of that assessment. And academic results have to be kept in perpetuity. So that's something that, you need to make sure you have the necessary resources to be able to do that. Go to the next slide. So, and then so what I talked about in a previous slide was more of the sort of, it's all compliance, but more sort of pure compliance requirements. This slide is more about the ongoing quality assurance requirements. So as you become a registered provider and you have your own accreditation, your own consent to assess against standards, there are a range of things that you will need to participate in from a quality assurance perspective. So adherence to national learning hour expectations is really important to us. I'm sure that's also important to TEC, as that's the basis of funding. This is where our qualification system is foundation principle for it is that 1 credit equals approximately 10 hours of learning and assessment. So some of you in some industries may be aware of work that Waihanga Raro has recently been doing in that space of clarifying requirements. And so we do expect you to adhere to that ratio. We understand that in individual cases, there may be more learning hours required or less learning hours, but on average, we expect it to be the ratio of 1 credit to 10 learning hours. And that is something that we do monitor in a variety of ways. We also expect you to participate in national external moderation when you assess against unit standards. And obviously that's very common in industry training, so you'll be aware of that. At the moment, that process is managed by the standard setting bodies for each domain. I'm not sure what arrangements have been made for the future of that. Maybe
iSpace will be the new
of the
standard.
ISBs. Okay, so they will take on the role of managing the national external moderation process, and that's basically where you have to provide assessment samples for external moderation. You also have to participate in NZQA program monitoring. This is a process where we look at whether your program is being delivered according to the approval that we have given you, sort of what you told us when you initially applied. Are you still adhering to that? We look at assessment practice and the qualification of staff and a range of other things to do with the quality of education and delivery for a specific program or a suite of programs. In terms of the code of practice, so Jen spoke about that earlier. So there's 2 aspects to the code. There's the code for domestic learners, which applies to every provider. You don't need to get a special approval for that. That applies to you automatically. You're bound by it automatically. If you enroll international learners, that includes people on work visas, you have to be a signatory to the international code. So whether you whether you are mandated by the domestic code or both, you have to carry out an annual self-review against the requirements of the code. And then you have to attest to NZQA that you have performed that review. You're also required to publish the review on your website in full. And you're also required to publish information about complaints you have received from learners and your management of those. There is also another entity to be aware of called study complaints. They're the dispute resolution scheme for learners that have contractual or other financial disputes with their providers. So even work-based learners would be eligible for that. There are changes to the way that NZQA does quality assurance. Again, keep an eye out. There will be a consultation coming out in the coming weeks with a little bit more detail on what those arrangements may look like. Obviously, it's a consultation, is yet to be confirmed, but that should give you a picture of some of the other requirements that may be in place going forward, probably by the time you obtain registration. And again, important to stress that failure to meet quality assurance standards can result, and does, like this does happen, and the loss of accreditation, consent to assess or registration. Any type of statutory action that we take against providers is published on the NZQA website. So it is really important that you keep up to date with requirements and participate in all of the available and all the quality assurance activities that we carry out, but also we do publish a lot of guidance and guidelines on how to be compliant, on how, what is good assessment practice and all those sorts of things. So, and we'll continue to work on that with the ISPs in future. Thank you. Oh, and this is the slide that Jen was talking about in terms of how to contact us. Just important.
So, thanks, Anna. We are nearly there, I promise you. I know that this has been a massive download of information, so I appreciate your patience. Just want to talk very briefly about some of the ongoing requirements from the TEC point of view. And you're probably already aware of annual investment plan processes, things like that. But something I did want to raise is also our response framework. And this is where we make decisions about, where do we grow and reduce our funding for specific providers and specific provision. And so there is quite a lot of scrutiny on how well your learning is performing for the people who are receiving it and the employers in this context as well. So I think it's just an awareness that we look at your results every time we fund and throughout the year. And of course, we do talk to NZQA as well. So there are those concerns, they can impact your funding, as can financial concerns if we are worried about stability of the provider. So I won't go on about it too long, but just to be aware that that response framework is on our website and it is worth a bit of a read as part of your planning for being a PTE.
So I think the framing of that would be, you can't assume that just because you set yourself up for it as a PTE, you're automatically going to be funded every year at the level that you get funded initially. Because every year we will look at what the government's priorities are, and sometimes the government makes choices, like they have regularly over the last few years, where we need to redirect funding to particular target areas. And that often means, unless we get additional funding, that we have to reduce the amount of funding we have in some sectors. So that is also something that you're susceptible to, being part of the PTE. One of the best things that you can do in those situations is for us to see that you're delivering really good results for your learners. Because that's always, when we're looking at redistributing money, we will go looking at providers who aren't delivering as good a results, and we'll ensure that the funding is protected for those that are really supporting their learners well. And so those two things coming together feed into our overall investment process and are really important. And in work-based learning, that is complicated because you have a role, the employer has a role, and the learner has a role. But we need to see, because we know broadly across the landscape that we would like to see improved results for learners that are in work-based learning, and we'll be working very closely with the sector over the coming years in terms of improving the results, because they have big impacts on learners that start programs then stop. It has massive impacts on their potential income they can earn. It has impacts on your business as well. And so we need to be ensuring that we're working together on that, because at the end of the day, We want the learners to be successful. We want you to be successful, but we also work within a constrained amount of funding, and we have to make decisions about that every day.
Great. And the last thing I'm going to talk about before we get to questions is about some more webinars that are coming up on the 7th of August. So I noticed in the registrations that there's quite a few people who are from businesses and industry associations, and these webinars are really targeting you. One of the things that the new VET system gives us is the opportunity to reshape what our network of work-based learning provision looks like. And that's a really quite an exciting thing. We need to make sure we have the right mix of providers and provision to meet the needs of industry. And so talking about what that means and how industry can have a voice in that is what those webinars will be about. So if you are from industry, I really recommend you sign up. There's 2 on the 7th of August, and we will record because we appreciate not everyone will be able to make those as well. Right, now we're going to dive into questions. When did you release those to us? Have you got?
So if you can see the Q&A